And the good thing is that we've been here before. We've been here before as a country, and we've been here before as an organization. The ACLU was founded almost 100 years ago in a moment that's very similar to Trump's America, in a moment of massive unrest, of a political system that felt to be on the verge of dysfunction, parties that were at loggerheads with each other, a burgeoning immigrant population that was pouring through our shores. There were concerns that the enemy within were people who would come to our country from foreign nations. They were Russians and Germans and Poles, and many of them Jews. And you had law enforcement officials who seized on the insecurity of the moment and the fears of a growing labor movement and of a burgeoning immigrant population to play to nativistic tendencies and to fire up the xenophobia that had always been in the embers of the American public, and launched the full fury of the Justice Department and what we would see and call the Palmer raids that would summarily deport thousands of individuals without due process. And it was precisely out of that crucible moment that the ACLU was born, where a bunch of very young and idealistic and optimistic folks dared to create an organization that would stand up for the rights of all people. And we would see that same kind of hysteria and that moment of crisis in the 1950s, when an anti-communist hysteria swept the United States, and the House Un-American Activities Committee would begin to target individuals based on their political affiliations and who they associated with and what speech they dared speak. And we saw it also to a very large extent. It was evident in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, in the days that Terry first referenced, when literally we would read, and we would now read in our modern history books, that FBI agents would target individuals based on their South Asian and Muslim and Arab surnames, literally combing through the phone book at a time when we had phone books, in 2001. And they would try to highlight and target the Muslims and the Arabs and the South Asians for investigation. This was a time when our government invited in all the young Muslim men between the ages of 18 and 33 for voluntary fingerprinting and photographing. Not that they were a threat, but just in case. We just wanted to invite them in to offer up their fingerprints and photographs so that we could, just in case, we'd be able to find them if we needed to. And that was a program put out and executed through our federal government, where very few organizations dared ask the questions in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, we being one of the few. And so we've been there before when government officials and government leaders prey upon moments of instability and use those moments to further an ideological agenda for their own political purposes. And I dare say, I think we are in the very early stages of a very similar moment with the last year of Donald Trump as president. It feels like we've entered a very different era for politics and for civil liberties and civil rights in the US. And it reminds me that some of the old axiom of our founder, Roger Baldwin, saying that no battle for civil liberties ever stays won. I think that is true, and that's why we have to remain very focused at holding that arc to make sure it doesn't snap back at us. But I also think, in the spirit of Molly Ivins, we have to also remind ourselves that even when we were battling unconstitutional and moments of crisis, that even when these outrages were being perpetrated and the government acted with assaults on the Constitution, we were indeed expanding rights and liberties. That even in the most difficult moments, we could find a way to push the ball forward down the field. That the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote, was ratified at the height of the Palmer raids. that the modern civil rights movement was born out of the Red Scare, that the fight for LGBT rights entered the mainstream precisely at the time of the War on Terror, and that it was the great strength of our nation that even as we made mistakes, even as we fought these battles, that we always carried with us the momentum toward greater justice and expansion of human rights, and that we bent the arc if we could apply the pressure and not let it snap back. And that, it seems to me, my friends, is the challenge for us, to make sure that even as we hold off on the many challenges that are in front of us, which are significant, that we must not lose sight of the fact that we are here not just to play defense, but we have an offensive game to play, that we have an affirmative agenda to achieve, that even as we hold them off, that we have to go further and play a second track of advancing rights and liberties. And I think there might be a way forward on some of these issues.